welcome to this week's episode titled Exodus. So, for those of you who know and don't know, and etc. and so forth, we have moved from Sanctum of the Exalted over to the Ebon Hawk. And, well, we feel more like Sanctum of the Exiled here, because we've been kind of exiled from the previous server. So, I think we're all going to share one of our memories and stuff from when we were over on Sanctum as a sort of memorial and tribute to the old server. So I'm going to start out with my memory of the first 16-man Karaga's Palace run that our guild did. So we're going to go ahead and switch to some footage and show that. So, Jaren, what is one of your fondest memories over on Sanctum of the Exalted?
I'd have to say, actually, the funniest thing was that when I started playing with the RMC, I'd actually never met any of the higher, I guess, or the initial founding members other than Leori. So for me, I just kind of jumped on early start. The first hour the servers were live. I'm in the guild, and I get all these hellos from people that I think I saw maybe once or twice during beta, and then just went for it, and ever since then, just that getting to know everybody as I was playing through.
Then go ahead and pass it to Mark.
Give me a second to think on that, actually.
Okay. Hey, Korik, what's one of your fondest memories while we were over on Sanctum?
Sanctum of the Exalted was obviously our first live server, and I'm going to put it that way because we don't know what's coming with the future. Of note, I know many of the founding members of the guild, or many of us who joined it early on, were beta players who were with the RMC or the IMC in that beta period. And to be completely honest, the nice thing that I remember, or the fond memory that I have of Sanctum of the Exalted, is actually having those same people around all the time. People that you recognize, people that you got to know, that you were familiar with, that you'd had fun with, racing through the levels, seeing Katie constantly grinding the PvP, the family atmosphere that it created that caused a lot of us to continue to stay within the Republic Mercy Corps or the Imperial Mercenary Corps. And then watching that build into something that we had never planned from the very beginning, which was the ops. We were a stated social guild, not an endgame guild, yet we became very, in my mind, very effective at the endgame, even though that was not really ever our goal. And so, to a certain extent, I think my fondest memories come from doing the ops and the flashpoints with the guild. I remember my very first op, Eternity Vault. I believe it was the second run or the third run on the Republic Mercenary, or the Republic Mercy side. And I believe we struggled only with the towers, and then after that I think we pretty much cruised through everything else we were dealing with. So it was a testament to the players that we had, because I know a large number of us had no experience with Eternity Vault on that particular run.
Right. Yeah. It was pretty interesting watching the guild grow, certainly. What about you, Tiberianus?
Well, I got in fairly recently. One of my real-life buddies, Malin, introduced me to the guild, and happened to join in, pick up a spot for the operation running, and Oh yeah, it's been a blast running the in-game content. Sanctum had a way better name than the Ebon Hawk, but that's just personal taste talking.
Yeah, Ebon Hawk certainly had a more of a KOTOR feel to it, but Sanctum had more of an actual like Star Wars feel to it. Because, man, wasn't that from... That was from one of the comics, wasn't it?
Hey, if I
I'm
may
not sure
interject,
they got that name.
Oh, what's that?
the thing I can say about our guild is the camaraderie. Like, the person just before me, we met through a bonus series, and ever since then, we've been like, this whole guild is nothing but helping each other out and doing things. I mean, from that point on, I out of the blue gave you a prototype gear, and then ever since then we've been pretty good online friends, and that's what this guild represents towards me. So if you have to say that's what a fondness of memory is, I'm brand new to the guild, but that's what this guild represents to me, and you can't replace that, you can't build that, it's just there, and that's what's so great about this guild.
Yeah, one of the biggest things with this guild is the connections we've made with each other over the whole course of time. And, it's like, as time's gone on in the guild, it's like more and more of us have gotten together, and each of us have had, a chance to work with each other, help each other out, and have a whole lot of fun. And, our guild, we got a lot of nice personalities. There's a lot of nice mature people here. I love that it's always drama free, and whenever we've had an incident, it's always been dealt with professionally and quickly.
Since I've been here, we haven't had anything.
Go ahead, Mary.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm actually interested to hear Mark's thoughts on it.
So Mark, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, from day one, I was impressed with how fast we got both guilds up. We had both guilds up within maybe an hour of the server going up. We had so many people excited, they took the day off. We got in game, we got the credits earned as fast as possible, got to the guild registrar, and formed the RMC and the IMC almost simultaneously. One of the things that really impressed me in the early days of Sanctum and the formations of the guild is the exposure we were getting. We got an interview on Krellian Radio because people just came to our website, and even though they weren't even in the guild, they were reading the lore and really getting into the lore that we had created that kind of formed the bond between the Republic and the Imperial guilds, and what the backstory was. And we won a award on the official forums for Ryan's recruitment poster that said "Give blood, the Empire will need it," with our RMC symbol on it. And let's see. We had this guild was kind of in some ways doomed from the beginning because we were playing on an East Coast server. The guild founders were on the West Coast, but somehow with our players being from all across the U.S., from Canada, England, we had some from Germany and Australia. The guild just automatically, as somebody had said, became a really cohesive family. And Ryan and I, especially being on the West Coast, we couldn't be on as typical guild leaders were to orchestrate events and get people involved with our leadership. Everybody just did it on their own. They logged on, they formed groups together, and it was like just an immediate a family. And to this day, even though we're smaller and some people are kind of taking a break from the game, it's still that way, as Mary has seen, and it's really what makes this guild a great guild, and the memories of Sanctum will always be part of this guild.
Agreed.
So what about the move itself?
The move itself was pretty interesting. I remember when we first got word that they were going to transfer us out of Sanctum into the Ebon Hawk. I'll be honest, I was saying it the week before to a bunch of the guildies. I said, I really don't see them transferring anybody to our server. And so when the news came, I wasn't too surprised like most of the others, but at the same time I was really disappointed and kind of upset. I was one of the first few to actually transfer over to Ebon Hawk, and as soon as I got over here and realized that some people were going to have to change names, I realized how chaotic things would be if we did not have the guild set up right away. So I got a couple others, like Jaren, Shalani, and then forgetting a couple other people. But a few people anyways helped me get the RMC and the IMC back up real quick, and then from that point, it's like towards later in the afternoon, people started transferring as they got home from work, and they had the guild to actually transfer into. So even though there was a bunch of name changes, people were updated with who to contact when they transferred so that they could get re-invited, and so that everybody could be more coordinated. There was a lot of butthurt over lost names. I think everybody, or almost everybody, lost at least one name. Some people lost all their names. Some people only lost half of them, like me. It was really a mixed feeling kind of experience.
Yeah, I remember the setup day. It actually kind of goes back to what you were saying, Merrick, with how there's a lot of just responsibility and that ability to step forward and kind of do things. Because I remember I happened to be lucky and had the day off work, and we got the news that we were transferring, so I sat on Alderaan all day just crafting with my sniper, waiting for people to get home, log in, so that we could get the family back together again on our new home.
Yeah, I remember being at work. I did not expect Sanctum to be an Origin server, and getting the news, I think, over Twitter, and I was just kind of in shock. And then we had a bunch of officer emails going around, and everybody was pretty much frantic about it. And a lot of people extremely upset as they logged in to find out that their names were gone. Most of my names were gone. I was really upset about it. But it sure looks like in the end they've made a good move. I mean, every night there's 200 people plus on fleet, and it had been since launch. It had not been since launch since we'd seen those numbers, but we lost some people over it. Some really good people, because their character names that they had on tunes for decades in other MMOs were now somebody else's, and it just kind of killed their love for the game. Although I suspect some will be back if once a big expansion gets released. But it was a rough time, and I'm still a little upset about losing my character names, but in the end it looks like it was definitely the right move by BioWare.
Yeah, it was a rough time, but the family stuck together. So Phil, what's one of your fond memories from Sanctum?
Well, I was one of the beta testers that beta tested for well over a year. So I made a decision when the game launched that I was going to take about a 3-month break from the game. So when it launched, I took the time off, came back 3 months later, joined the guild up in March again, and so everyone was already up to level 50s. And here I am tugging along trying to catch up to everybody. And when I finally turned 50, it was time for me to come and get my gear. And I remember we ended up doing something like 16 hard modes before I finally got my first piece of gear. And there were people in the guild who were tugging me along to these hard modes. Actually, you felt the compassion and the sorrow in them going, just felt the pain that I was going through not being able to get the gear right away. And then there was a huge celebration when I finally got my first piece of gear.
It's always exciting getting gear at any time and stuff. It's always fun getting that achievement. It's funny. There's been a couple, I want to say, there's been a couple hard modes that we went on recently and stuff. And there would be 3 of us that were consulars, and there'd be 1 trooper. And we'd go through and we'd get the loot, and it'd all be trooper loot. And I was like, that doesn't make much sense, because 1 trooper, 3 consulars, you'd think 1 to 3, but somehow twice a trooper made away with like all the loot, and the rest of us were just dumbfounded.
Yeah, but if you don't mind, let me go back and I'd like to address the issue on the Sanctum to the Ebon Hawk thing. Hate to say it, but in my opinion, it was it's a double-edged sword. I know there's a lot of people who are waiting on queuing up for PvP, but now we have the opposite. Now a lot of us are waiting to. World bosses aren't dropping. You have to come back days later to sometimes to try to take them on. So, you do have your. That's what I missed about the Sanctum. You went to an area, you weren't fighting 50 people. Something that would normally take you 15 minutes to run a daily now is taking you 30 minutes at times, or 40 minutes to complete it, because you're fighting everybody for the items. So you kind of had your pros and cons overall about it, but I really did think BioWare did drop the ball on how the transfer should have happened, how they should have notified people, kind of giving people heads up. I think people who purchase the game ahead of time to get so they can get on their servers and get their names. Yeah, I just felt BioWare should have done more and prepared more for that.
Yeah.
So that leads actually to a good topic for another discussion, which is, did BioWare make the right decision in launching with a couple hundred servers so that nobody had any queue times during the first couple weeks of launch? Or was the end result of them having to collapse all these servers and causing some strife, should it have been avoided by launching with fewer servers and having people wait and be a little frustrated at launch? What do you guys think would have been the best choice there?
Well, I don't have a lot of background in terms of computer, like architecture, or how much servers you need to be able to properly take a load of people or whatnot. But that aside, I think that part of the reason they opened with so many servers, of course, they did have the smoothest MMO launch I've ever been a part of or ever seen. And obviously, of course, part of that too is probably, I don't think they opened that many servers deliberately with the intention of, okay, and then once things balance out from launch, then we're going to close a bunch of them down. I think there was some genuine optimism on the part of BioWare and EA that they were going to be able to maintain those numbers of servers. Obviously, that's not the case, as they have collapsed down. I think the bringing them together overall has been a good thing. I mean, it's created a healthier community. I mean, you're able to do things like heroics, being able to do things like hard modes and pickups a lot easier. But like you mentioned there before, Phil, it would have been nice to see something like somebody who was on the servers at 7 a.m. right when they launched and then ended up losing their name because of the transfer. It would have been nice, to be able to, to be able to maybe give priority to people who had created their characters sooner. Again, I don't know what a logistical nightmare that would be. But, what do you think, Brent?
Well, it's kind of a mixed situation. As far as the names go and stuff, I mean, losing names, and then see, I tested in beta for probably a year or so. I was in both phases. I got to test in phase 1 for a brief duration, and then I got to test in phase 2 when we were just testing the whole game. And so yeah, I tested for about a year. And it's like when they gave us early access so we could reserve our names, it's kind of like, a sort of reward. And the transfers, kind of ripped that reward away from us. And all I could think during the time was, how dare they take that away from us? I thought to myself, there's a bunch of people transferring, sure, but what about the people who are inactive, whose subscriptions have run out? Do they really deserve to reserve a name even though they're not even paying anymore, and now that they're not even financing this game? So, I really started to think about that, and I was like, it just doesn't feel right, and I really felt that they should have let their names expire too.
That was one of Ryan's big tiffs with the way things were done, is that when he was his characters were transferred from Sanctum to Ebonhawk, and he'd go look at the names, that the level of the person whose names had taken his names, they're like level 1s. They were probably created, and then that person just played the game, canceled their sub, and they were just taking up. They were reserved, but by somebody who probably wasn't even paying for the game. And that's a good point. People who weren't subbed should have lost their name reservations.
I guess I would. I'm trying not to. I would disagree, and what I mean by that is, I did a 60-day trial card on mine. You know what? I went out with my son Boy Scout camping. I let it go 6 days without renewing it. I would hate to come back 6 days later and find out my names are gone just because I allowed my subscription to lapse for 6 days.
That's a good point.
The thing is, and Mark and I have talked about this in the past, about how long some of us have played MMOs. I have been involved with MMOs since the very beginning, shortly after EverQuest, the first EverQuest started, and I've literally played almost every Western release that has come out. And just, one thing of note is you never know when someone's going to come back to the game. They could be coming back to the game the day after you take their name away. From a gaming company's point of view, BioWare was, because of their initial architecture, they were really in a no-win situation as far as who gets to keep a name. The real failure here, I think, from Korik's point of view, if you will, is that they were so gung-ho about getting those servers merged so they could start saving money, or whatever their reasoning behind it was, so they could implement the group finder and have it be useful, or whatever their argument was. They didn't stop to think and actually come up with the right way to handle this. If you look at the last, 5 or 10 years worth, probably 5 years worth of launches, the whole server flood and then downsizing is actually becoming par for the course, with the exception of, obviously, the great juggernaut WoW. And they'll lose servers here in another 3 or 4 years would be my guess. But I think the name process needs to be handled better. In my mind, what they should have done was had a separate server that was basically a name filter, so that once you took a name, it didn't matter which server you logged into, it was yours.
That's
and
a pretty
would
good
make
idea.
That would make a lot of people have to think harder and come up with names, maybe replacing ones they've had for years and years and years, but they would have known that getting into the game, rather than rolling with the game for 3 to 6 months and then getting bent like some of our players did.
Yeah, well, Star Trek Online actually did something very similar to that. It's your account name was unique. Now, of course, to be fair, Star Trek Online only has a single server that everyone plays on. But if they had multiple servers, this does allow them to expand because they do unique character names or unique account names. And then your character name can be whatever the heck you want, and you could have the same character name as somebody else, but your account name would be unique, so there'd be no problem. And it would actually show as, your character name at your account name.
Guild Wars 2 does the same thing. It is a good system. You just avoid all naming problems that way. You might have 50 Dritz Deardens, but... or however the hell you pronounce that.
Of those anyway. It'll just be spelled like 7 or 8 different ways.
Exactly.
Well,
I would personally like to have seen BioWare at least give you the option to move to 2 different servers. I mean, here's the server option 1, and then number 2. Here's your second. You can go in between 1 or 2. To force you to go to a particular server, I thought, yeah, that didn't go over well either.
Server merges traditionally are never well received, and you will lose subscriptions based on them. End of story. But when they do server mergers, generally it's because a game has no choice. Like, for example, with Star Wars, a lot of the features that came out in 1.3, let's be honest, would have been completely useless on Sanctum of the Exalted in its state before things shut down. The group finder would be absolutely useless. And I for one am not a fan of the way that World of Warcraft did its group finder, which was cross-server, because there was no penalty for being an asshat. And so what you ended up having was everyone became a ninja, because, hey, if you didn't, the next guy would. And there was no consequences, because very rarely did you ever group with somebody on your server. So, it had to be done, and they had to kind of streamline it into certain servers. But yeah, the whole naming thing, hopefully that's a lesson learned from their aspect.
Well, let's not drift too far away from the topic. So, since Dominicus is with us now, what's one of your fondest memories while over on Sanctum, Dom?
I would have to say mostly it's just the beginning of the guild when everyone was grouping up and we were just going along with our story modes, helping each other out. The social aspect of it, it was at first it was a little chaotic on the server, but then it gradually became kind of gelled out, and you got to see especially certain guilds form certain ways, and you could tell who groups were and what was going on, and especially as you were going from system world to system world, and it was just that part of it I think I'm going to take more than anything else with me as a good memory.